Well, welcome to week 6. Cottage Grove, you getting signal?
Yeah.
Don't sound so enthusiastic now. All right. Just a few logistical things. I actually have been checking our spam filters, so I haven't seen any of your assignments go there. I'm setting up the grade book still. I have everything graded already, but it's not electronically graded so that you can see it. But generally speaking, if you turned it in, you got full credit. So 30 points. If you do the extra credit email thing, that's all to the good. That's fine. There's already extra credit built into the tests. So to the tests, midterm, as I said before, goes out Thursday. Physically and electronically, take home open book. It'll be online, but also I'm oriented towards old school paper. So I prefer that it come back that way if you're going to send it back. Electronically send it back as a Microsoft Word file. It's my preference. So, due back in a week. So we're going to be looking at this week money addictions, overspending, gambling, chronic debting, living paycheck to paycheck, credit cards, looking at some memes for money, health, poverty and wealth. So when people talk about financial independence, so for example, at my age, when people talk about retiring, they talk about retiring, working a 40-year work life, and retirement is getting paid to do what you want to do, which kind of begs the question, why aren't you doing what you want to do anyway? But financial independence is kind of defined, well, it depends on who's doing the defining. So as an example, I have a green marker here. I haven't talked to you about crash yet, have I?
You brought it up last class.
Huh?
You said you brought it up last class, but there was like 3 of us.
Okay. So, crash is an acronym for a construct about understanding systemic discrimination. Right? So, class, because America is basically there's a caste system here based on how rich you are. And so, for example, so above the line you have privilege. Below the line, you're targeted. So that's for class. So crash, the acronym is class, racism, spirituality, addiction, ability, age. So it's C, R squared, A cubed, SH. So race and spirituality are R cubed, are R squared. Age, addiction, and ability are A cubed. And sexism and heterosexism. And they interact, they're interlocking. So it's not like a hierarchy, So in other words, a black, lesbian, Muslim in a wheelchair that's on welfare is not necessarily more discriminated against if she's like a CEO. So it's not like, piling on different oppressions. They interact. Right? So as an example, let's say that above the line, so basically above this line, it's like $80,000 a year. Now, the only problem with that, I'm not slamming on Republicans in particular, but I want to point out something that happened during the 2012 campaign. Okay, Mitt Romney basically said, fire your insurance company. Well, that's only possible if you own the insurance company. Most of us don't own insurance companies or aren't millionaires or billionaires and can be self-insured. Most of us aren't. The reason this $80,000 line is here is you could be above the line in income, but have something catastrophically medical happen to you. For example, woman in Arizona got stung by a scorpion. The anti-venom was $40,000 a dose, and she had 2. Okay, so that's her entire year's income gone. Puts her below the line, right? Because insurance is not going to pay for that, right? Now, one of the covered conditions. And that's also one of the pieces with, ACA or Obamacare. Like, okay, look, too many people are going bankrupt from their medical stuff. That shouldn't happen. Too many people are not getting covered because of pre-existing conditions from whatever, just living, etc. People are being made homeless because they can't pay their medical bills. For example, the local hospital taking your house because you couldn't afford your cancer treatment, so now you're homeless on the street. Not making that up. Okay, so how does that happen? So if you're above the line, so theoretically I'm above the line being a college professor, middle class, and that's my income, right? But and I'm well insured, but getting catastrophically ill could put me below the line. Right? So above the line then becomes like above that, if that's not covering you, right? So the other piece around socioeconomic status, that's what we call class. That's the intersection between occupation, education, and social status. Like your rank in society. So again, there's this myth in America that we don't have a caste system, but in fact we do. And homeless people, for example, can be on the bottom as untouchables, like in India. People ignore you, you could make $200 a day flying a sign or canning, but lots of people are being made homeless because, not through any fault of their own, because it's structured to do that. Our economy is structured to do that. So you being in college, you are actually studying to be at or above this line. That's the idea, right? Get a degree, get a good job, et cetera, as long as you haven't spent too much money on student loans, et cetera, et cetera. I remember I was reading a letter to the editor today, because I grew up, basically college, full-time, cost $150 a term. That included books in the 70s. And I could live on $150 a month rent then, because rent was $75. Then leaving the rest for food, and then I just worked my little restaurant job in addition to taking a 14 credit load and semesters and all that. So it didn't go into debt. Now there's a whole industry around that. So in terms of financial independence, where are you now? Where do you want to go? For example, a lot of times, and one of the things I want to point out about addicts in particular, let's say that you have a $200 a day Eugene habit for heroin. So if you multiply that out, it's $73,000. That's minimum wage for a doctor going to heroin. Usually even though most of the addicts and alcoholics in the United States are employed, lots of them aren't. And they still have to come up with that money every day. And what if they were able to, so there's an underground economy, obviously, right? So there's a certain training that goes along with supporting a habit like that. All right, so somewhere around 20% of the United States population is using illegal drugs. Goes up higher if you include marijuana in that. But the illegal drug basically is consuming the United States consumes at least half of the illegal drug output of the planet. So part of the reason, so when we talk about the legal economy, 70% of that is consumer spending. That is, you are buying stuff that will break or wear out and has to be replaced. And you will, if you listen to the radio or, watch the business pages or whatever, when they talk about durable goods are things that last 5 years or longer. Stoves, refrigerators, cars. Okay, maybe not your used car, but, durable goods, right? You're not buying those every year. But those are also gauged in terms of the health of the economy. Because you have to have a job to buy a washing machine. Right? There's an informal economy, as they refer to it in Britain with their standard for understatement, is about 8 to 9% of GDP, about $1 trillion. That's not just drug dealing, that's other forms of what I'll refer to as the underground economy. They refer to it as informal because it isn't tracked on the stock exchange. But it's there. So, as to where did consumers come from, there's a whole sustainability question. There's a website and a movie at this place called The Story of Stuff. You can check it out. It's cute. We're not going to really take a lot of time with it during class, but I have done it in the past. It's an interesting thing in terms of looking at our American society in terms of where do we get the idea that consuming stuff was going to be our identity. And what does it take to do that? 5% of the world's population, that's us, consumes more than half the planet's resources to sustain our lifestyle. All right, so part of the reason behind the How I Spent My Week diary is the idea is to kind of look at where your money goes and begin to kind of make some changes as need be from where you are now and where you want to be. And a lot of times, many people have not sat down to do this with their money. Money talks. All mine knows how to do is say goodbye. And so there's certain terms that are thrown out where people don't necessarily ask questions because they feel like, well, I should know this, or I feel dumb for asking the question. And I'm not a financial advisor, and the class is basically looking at intro to addictive behavior. So for example, there are money traps. Just like when I talk about induced ignorance addictions. Like you didn't know that you could be strung out easily on Xanax or Valium or Cymbalta or, alcohol. Well, there's money traps, too, that prey on your ignorance of how money works. Okay? You know not to lick your fingers and stick it into a light socket, but how to use money in a way that can benefit what you want to do. So you taking a harm reduction approach, since a lot of times what we're doing with money is not always conscious, let's try and reduce some of that harm. So I introduced a concept a week or so ago about, basically your inner spiritual cartography. Well, budgets are a cartography too, because they're a map, right? So any budget reflects your priorities. You know what they say about follow the money. Any budget reflects your priorities, not only personally, but also as an organization. If you value something, there's money attached to it. So, if you feel that your circumstances, your money circumstances dictate to you rather than you dictate to your circumstances, then it might be useful to figure out how to change them and to plan to change them. So first you have to know where you are. So the assignment is designed to show you where your money's going and where potential leaks are and begin to close them up. So for example, impulse buying is a big one. Okay? So the whole rule about don't shop when you're hungry, make a list and stick to it, keep track of how much your total is and a running total while you're shopping, stay at or within or under budget. But first you have to generate a budget. So where are you headed financially? Where have you been financially? Where are you now? Create a map. That's one way of looking at it. Big picture, big overview. Now, money is one of those things. So I talked about money sadhana. So sadhana, as a yoga teacher, one of the things you talk about is your daily spiritual practice, something you do every day. And the reason it's spiritual is because it basically relates to your connection to the rest of the universe and your overall life mission and all those things. So a daily financial discipline that reflects your values, whatever those are. That's your money sadhana. So there will be a question on the midterm coming up where this is an acronym. My own natural energy yield. Okay, your money flows where you put your attention. That's why you set up a budget. What do you have to pay attention to? What would you like to pay attention to more? And putting your intention to where you want your money to go. So I want to start with the concept of what money is. So I've traveled in West Africa where the paper money has a picture like of a cowrie shell, which used to be money there. Pre-colonial, pre-European contact. Here on Turtle Island, Native Americans basically had a gift economy where lots of things could be used as money. So for example, tribes in the Southwest who could mine turquoise would trade straight across for abalone shell. Now you may not think that that's the same value, but diving for abalone, right? You can't just wait, go beachcombing and expect to get abalone shell. There's also a shell I'm not wearing today, but you will see it. Our powwow, if you go to powwow, certain coastal tribes will have these tiny little shells called dentalium. That's because they look like small teeth, about this big, sometimes this big. They grow at 60 feet. So harvesting them means it's extremely difficult, and they're valuable because they're extremely difficult to get. Therefore rare, therefore used as money. Like lots of people use shells for money, as well as wampum and other things, which is also another form of shell. The Incans didn't use gold for money. Gold was like wallpaper. Gold was like for using jewelry. The actual trade item was coca, because it enabled you to do work as a trade item, just like any crop. All right, so when Europeans come, wow, you're using gold for wallpaper. Wow, like, we can't get that in London, or in Cortez's case, Spain. So money is surplus labor. So surplus labor is that beyond which you need to survive. So here's the idea. In tribal times, you and your household were responsible for gathering your own water, gathering your own food, building your own structure, making your own clothes. You didn't depend on anybody else for any of that stuff. But in order to trade, you had to be able to give somebody something that they didn't have. So what if that was a skill? So understand, when we talk about the economy ain't just money. The economy is knowledge. The economy is know-how. The economy is any body of knowledge or wisdom or anything that can be traded to somebody who doesn't have it. So in a non-gift economy, so Native Americans having a gift economy, that means if I give you a gift, that has spiritual value, you have to give me a gift that's worth more. Or at least equal. Okay, so not just shells, but some kind of something of spiritual significance, something you made, something you put your heart into. So that's part of the economy as well. Not just the physical object, but the intent, the wisdom. Right? We don't have that, for example, with frog skins. Frog skins. Right? We used to be on the gold standard. Nixon took us off the gold standard when gold was $35 an ounce. I'm old enough to remember that. 11-cent gas. Penny candy. Soda pop was a dime a can. I mean, milk, loaf of bread was a nickel. Okay, so surplus labor is that which beyond you need to survive, so the money becomes a symbol of that. Now, in today's society, y'all don't go to the river and gather your own water. You buy your clothes unless you make them, but again, you don't necessarily make the cloth, you don't grow the cotton. We're basically way more interdependent, so that the way our economy is set up is that you need a source of income to basically have these basic needs. And we don't live in a society where it's actually considered a sin to have poor people. That is, nobody should be homeless, nobody should be hungry. We're not, when I'm talking about Native Americans, they didn't believe in having poor people, or homeless people, or hungry people. If there's plenty, then you give to those who are down on their luck. If there's nothing, not that everybody starves, but pregnant women, elders, and children get the food, so that the able-bodied can go hunt or do whatever they need to do to support folks. So, surplus labor or money, a symbol of a tradable surplus, but that's where it started. It's way different now. So, money sadhana goes like this, the meme. Pay yourself first. This assumes that you have a source of income. Pay yourself first. Save, like right off the top. Invest what you save. Have saving goals. Reduce and eliminate debt. And increase your net worth with diverse investments. Avoid taxes. That's not by not paying them, but and protect your assets with income protection, which is, in this context, insurance. Sometimes you're required to have insurance, for your car and also now for health. And then what will you give away? Sometimes within the concept of money sadhana, which basically gets in, sadhana is a term from a particular type of spirituality, but the idea is that you give away as part of your spiritual practice or your spiritual beliefs. The whole bread upon the waters thing in a Christian framework. So that's it in a nutshell. So for example, as this is a question that I basically posed in Indian country. What if you thought of frog skins, greenbacks, as eagle feathers? That is a sacred power object. Now this was in a context where the particular Indian nation I was giving this talk to had the third largest casino on the planet. Foxwoods in Connecticut. Now, if you could imagine, I'll visualize LCC main campus. And then visualize all the separate buildings as a single building. And then imagine 3 of them. 3 malls. 2 theaters. A boxing rink. And then, of course, casinos and a 4 or 5-star hotel. 2 of them. In that complex. Imagine being able to totally support Electric Boat. That is Groton, Connecticut, where they make nuclear submarines. Being able to subsidize that with your profit. And this is a tribe of basically 500 folks doing this. So a lot of native nations, and so one of the things that people don't necessarily understand about Indian casinos, they make, in terms of profit, $10 billion, which is nothing, really, when you consider other industries. All the money goes out to management companies that are non-native. Now, some of them are able to do things like education and drug treatment, et cetera, but a lot of them, basically, the money gets kind of frittered away. So this basic concept that I was saying is like, what if your dollars were eagle feathers? Because if you aren't taught to deal with money in a particular way and you receive a $5,000 a month check, what are you going to do with it? Well, I know what happened in a lot of these places. They went up their nose or they drank it in 3 days. So the concept of, okay, you're not going to do that with an eagle feather. what you're going to do with an eagle, it's a sacred object. So how do you help people with it? What kind of medicine is associated with that, right? So it's a sacred gift to help you achieve your dream. So think of greenbacks in that particular way, in terms of budgeted spiritual discipline. Rather than a symbol of pain, a symbol of possibilities. Now, most people, their relationship with money is not optimal. More month than money, right? So a budget is a month-to-month plan that's going to lead to a longer-term plan. So balancing your checkbook is like brushing and flossing. Now, this may seem basic, but I've run into people who actually thought that their bank account was dependent on their checks. I can't have overdrawn because I still have checks left. What about the running balance? Seems dumb to some people, but where do they get trained about money? Who trained them? Sometimes you have personal finance in high school, but what if you skipped high school for whatever reasons? Then where do you get it? The bank? All right, so keeping a running balance is one skill. So budgeting is this week's mind or mood altering practice. So income. So these are some terms. So income is incoming cash flow. Savings is defined as is reserved, slow-growing investment. Investment, money tasked to grow towards a purpose. Education, retirement, travel. Now we're talking about an American context and our level of complexity of society. I personally use my disposable income, a lot of my disposable income as books. Knowledge can't be taken away. It's frozen. But with money tasked to grow towards a particular purpose. So college fund, educational fund, retirement, travel, entertainment, edutainment. There's a reason I'm starting out this way, because some people have one of the most common money addictions is like with gambling. And they have whole treatment centers tasked towards gambling treatment. Now, I haven't been trained in that, but one of the things that I talk about practically with folks, well, let's start with money health first. You know what you can gamble with? Money you have to throw away. Ain't got no money to throw away? Don't gamble. Seems simple, right? But what they're doing is essentially just like an impulse buy, it is an emotional decision. They feel some deficit, they feel some high. You will actually, we'll talk about this in somebody actually did a social recon because they worked in a bar that had video poker. So assets in finance are basically things that are valuable. Usually in an American context, this is like a home or a car. Home is generally a better asset than a car because theoretically home, real estate, land grows in value. Cars do not. Even if you buy a Rolls, $250,000, it will depreciate. Slower than a Cadillac, but still. Income protection is basically insurance to protect assets. There are various ways of doing that. Your expenditures are basically your outgoing cash flow. So things like mortgage or rent, car payment, insurance, food, household supplies, cleaning, paper stuff, school stuff, kids stuff. This is not in any particular order of priority. Your priorities may change or may be different. Just citing things that are common to students that they have cited in their past. How I spent my week assignment. Pets. So you kind of like draw a map. Credit card debt, past debt. This could include student loans, etc. So questions or anything? Comments?
New cars used to go up in value a long time ago, but not anymore.
They did. That's true. I used to be patriotic with my cars till I got burned by an American car company. And I stopped. Company was Ford. I got an Escort, the second model year that they came out, the 80s. If you know about cars, their timing, it was a stick. And I was going to be doing a lot of traveling. Their timing belt is plastic.
Was it a 310? I had an Escort too, Ford Escort 310.
And no, it's the second model year, so it was before that,
Oh.
right? So it was a stick. I went through 3 timing belts, 2 short blocks. But, I do 33,000 miles a year, so that,
Still.
right? So after that, I got I think I got a Nissan, then a Volvo. Brother who drives a Volvo was into safety, but mine was turbo, so I'm into speed too. From LA, Then gas went through the roof, and I got a Mazda because I like 35 miles to the gallon highway and speed. Right. So anyway, had the Mazda for like 6 years of nothing major happening to it. Oil changes, tire, tune-ups, nothing happened to it. So there's a whole question about engineering and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it's an asset, right, still. All right, so you also want to budget fun, recreation, what I call edutainment. The rapper KRS-One talks about edutainment. Something that makes you smarter rather than puts you to sleep or distracts you. All right. So, let me know if this is repeat for you, but rule of 72, you heard about this? So this is where the whole meme about understanding how money works. All right? So compound interest. Here's how that works. The bank makes money on your money. You understand that, right? They make money on your money by investing your money in the stock market. And then paying you the difference between what they profit off of and at a steady rate. Okay? Now, so for example, the rule of 72, here's what you do. You take the number 72 and divide it by the compound interest rate. This is different than credit cards, because this is credit cards are what they're charging you to borrow money. Compound interest is what they're paying you for holding on to your money. All right, so you divide the interest rate into 72, and that gives you the number of years it will take for your investment to double if you don't do anything with it. So 3%, a standard savings account is either 1, 2, or 3%. Usually about 1 or 2. So obviously if it's 2, it'll take 35 years if you leave the money in that particular investment vehicle to double. It's okay. I mean, at least it's growing, right? Unlike higher one. Yeah, I'm dissing you, higher one. Because guess what? They're making money off of your financial aid. And if you don't use it, they charge you until they overdraw your account and then charge you a fee for doing that. Now that's all in the fine print, and theoretically that's legal, theoretically. But how many people read the fine print? Right? So 5% money market. So a money market fund basically is when you see those instruments, you can get them at a standard bank. You put X amount of dollars. Usually they have a minimum like $500 to $1,000. They play with your money for 6 months and then pay you a return. So usually the more aggressive ones, that is the ones that pay more, around 5%. So at 5%, 14 years to double. 10% is basically 7.2 years. That's usually a mutual fund. So for example, I'm in PERS. The state of Oregon guaranteed. I'm tier 1 PERS because I started like 22 years ago. So automatically they're paying me 8% no matter what the market does, which will run into problems once the market crashes. That's why you're seeing all this controversy about PERS now, because they're obligated to pay us even though the market crashed due to, well, actually it's predictable if you understand how some of these markets work. People betting your pension on making money by basically, for example, the mortgage bubble, they were basically betting on houses that didn't exist yet, right? So 5 times the net worth of the planet. How does that work? Crash, boom. 12%, 6 years a mutual fund, and 25% extremely aggressive. Those are legal, but extremely aggressive means that they're fairly risky too. So most people, go in that middle range between 5% to 12%. Okay, risky investment, like I said, still legal, but sometimes if you get something that's more aggressive than 25%, you probably want to ask, where is that money being invested in? The reason I mention that is because we live in a state where the underground economy, like if you were going to invest, they basically can sometimes in the underground economy will say, hey, I can sell weed, sell my medical marijuana crop, and promise you a return on your investment of triple, so 33% or whatever. Well, the only way you can do that is by depending on, that this crop grown here will return investment by being sold over here. So for example, there are some Vietnamese gangs in Canada where marijuana can sell for $10 a gram. They're selling it back home in Hanoi for $45 a gram. So all you have to do is get it to Vietnam from Canada. right? Or produce it in Oregon and sell it in Chicago or New York or whatever. You know, all those different things. So the reason I started with an underground economy, look, it exists. It's there. People talk about it, sometimes write about it. So I'm not encouraging you, I'm just saying, look, be careful, be aware of what's going on. Okay, so with the exception of the savings account, all these above investments involve the stock market. All right, so in order for a bank to pay you 3%, they have to be making at least 10. Generally, what they're doing is investing at 25% and getting a 25% return and paying you 1 or 2. Now, there is no reason that you couldn't make the 25% too if you knew what you were doing in the market. But it's tricky, right? So, pay cash or do without. So revolving credit is credit crack. Makes you feel powerful, but you become a chronic user and strung out in debt. So the appropriate use of revolving credit is in emergencies. Webster defines emergency as a sudden set of unexpected circumstances that demands immediate action. Not the latest CD, or shoes, or clothes, or, in my case, guitars. Okay? So, purchases you must have and cannot get any other way. So one goal, if you're going to have credit, because basically they always tell you have to have, a credit card, et cetera, establish credit and be able to buy a house and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm telling you my mistakes so you don't have to make them. So understand why my attitude is about revolving credit is credit crack. Mom said, get a Sears card. That's a good way to start credit. Sure. Okay. So I bought a $350 lawnmower. And basically followed the minimum payments, $15 or whatever. Now, I actually did have the cash to just buy the lawnmower outright. But I wanted to establish credit. That lawnmower wound up costing $3,500. And I was typical. Right? Because, they charge you interest on a balance, which keeps growing. So, one goal. Never buy anything you can't pay off in 6 months with equal payments or in a fixed credit arrangement that's time limited. That is, they charge you a specific amount, but the amount remains the same and you take X amount of time to pay it off. You still kind of get ripped off, where, $5,000 becomes 8 or more with those even payments, or with revolving, you want to basically pay more than the minimum payment. So one rule of thumb that I've used is pay it off in 6 months. Never buy anything that you can't pay off in 6 months of even payments, which means you have to have made a budget before you did that. So, money is a stressor. So if we start with what makes us strong, money is a medium of exchange resembling surplus labor. Surplus labor is basically, I've defined that, so being able to take care of your immediate needs, including your need for health, wisdom, and intelligence. So an economy is the exchange of that which has value or of that which is valuable. In America, we generally associate the economy with the flow of money. There are other things that have value. So what used to be surplus labor, like your own ability to secure basic survival needs, has now been structured so that you're dependent on income to get those things. No income, sucks to be you. So our economy is based on inequality. That is, not everyone has equal access to basic survival needs, including education, wisdom or information or literacy. So to correct this deficit, a few basic memes. So for example, why gamble when you can have a sure thing? So if you had financial goals or directions you're moving toward, are you, so do you have a financial goal, or are you living paycheck to paycheck? So if you were living paycheck to paycheck, are you saving enough so that you can move on to another level? So without a financial goal or the discipline to reach it, you're kind of at the influence of addiction-inducing forces. So take, for example, gambling. This is from a social recon. There are 3 kinds of video poker players. When Jane cashed her winning ticket of $500, she gambled $700 to get there. Even though she is down $200, the ticket is proof there is big money to be made. So she cashes in and gambles the $500 away, $120 at a time. I've seen her every day for 5 years. Now, this is a person in her social recon. She did a social recon of the bar she worked in. And what people don't understand, okay, when you're a professional gambler, that means you're making money not with a machine, but with a human dealing cards. Okay, so understand, even as a professional gambler, the house is rigged to win more than you are. Right? So you can play the odds and basically make more money, and then, i.e., make it a profession. But that's not so with the machine. And so what this person observed is that when the machine started paying off too much, some folks came down from Salem and adjusted the computer so that it paid out less. And people are under the influence, not only under the influence, but under the impression that the machine is neutral. Well, wait, it's a computer. Computers are programmed. Why? It's designed to take your money. I'm not a gambler, so I see it as legalized theft with entertainment value. So that's Jane. The drinker, Howard, comes in, has a drink, and is usually out of there. When he has more than just one drink and is feeling good, he will go off to feed the machine, gambling with the rent or light bill money as if it will happen for him at any time in terms of a payoff. Okay, so this is why, in terms of like when you do a social recon on a particular environment, there's reasons why casinos don't have windows or clocks, cheap booze and food to keep you there and feeding money. Jim, a penny banker, brings in change to cash in for dollars and then plays to win for cigarettes or complimentary coffee or soda. On an average night, the video poker will average a gross intake of $7,000, with the machine only paying out $1,200 to $1,500. On these nights, however, lottery will gross $15,000 but pay out only $4,000. When is it enough? When will they realize that they have put so much money into their habit that not only are they not winning anything, but they will never come close to even breaking even? Now, that's intellectual. Okay, a gambling addict is actually playing their emotions. Because rationally, you can understand the game is rigged, you're not going to win, but still you try and do it anyway. I have seen students attempt to gamble in order to increase their higher one or financial aid, or, often more common is, goes up their nose or on the pipe, and then they find themselves 3 weeks behind in a world of hurt. But there are people that have tried to gamble their way. So, financial independence, right livelihood. It's a Buddhist concept, and the idea is you would do what your job is even if you didn't get paid for it, because it is your purpose in life, or your life purpose. Because it is your purpose in life, the universe supports you in doing it. And you are debt-free and not tied down by your lack of finances. So that's another definition of financial independence. Debt-free and supported. Not by somebody else, but by what you're doing as an even exchange. So a question that often comes up, may not be a question for y'all, don't have to reveal it if it is, but how do you convert from an underground income to a taxable one? So one of the things that often happens because of the underground economy, people make a lot of money drug dealing, but can't necessarily, well, they can't, the IRS has a section in your 1040 that you can declare illegal income. I don't know that anybody's ever does that. Okay, you can't bank more than $10,000. You can't make a deposit of more than $10,000 at a time. So what? You bury your money you put your money in a mattress, bury it in your backyard, whatever. Funny money goes faster. So many times people in the underground economy have been driven to participate in that economy without developing the skills of money, other than hustling for it and then spending it mostly to service debt, whether that debt is a drug habit or a family. Certainly here, the phenomenon of people who were multi-generation in the woods, chose not to graduate high school because they always had a job with Weyerhaeuser, and then Weyerhaeuser sends their jobs to Indonesia because it's easier to pay somebody $1 a day than $15 to $28 an hour. Right, the economics of that. So what these folks do, having a mortgage and family to feed, is they'll turn and have turned to the underground economy. Growing weed, meth, etc. Then making, a ton of money, then passing that business on to their kids with interesting effects. Okay, so if they're not in debt, then one of the things, it's about hiding the excess wealth that they can't officially declare. That usually means buying stuff. Certainly there are areas in the Emerald Triangle, you know what I mean by Emerald Triangle, right? Yes? No? In California, Humboldt, Trinity, and Mendocino counties. It's trim season now. Harvest season now. So not just there, here too. So a lot of people, jump at the chance of making $25 an hour or whatever. So the nature of that business does not lend itself necessarily to thoughtful reflection or planning, though, again, if you never had skill with money, suddenly getting a whole bunch of it doesn't necessarily make you more skillful. So, process addictions. So, money addictions are basically process addictions. Remember, there are two types of addictions. Ingestive, things you take into your body. Process, things you do with your body or your mind that engage the brain reward system. So money, health, and so the addictions field doesn't really address money except when they want it from you for treatment. But basically, gambling is essentially an addiction involving money. So gambling treatment, while advocating abstinence from gambling, it's that model, the same basically drug-taking model, doesn't necessarily teach money health other than setting a limit. Doesn't say stop gambling, set a limit when you gamble, which could work if you actually stuck to it. You know, you go to a movie, right? And you can spend more on popcorn and candy and drinks than it costs to get into the movie. So if you were going to go to a casino and you were thinking, okay, I'm going to limit myself to $20. And if you stuck with that, then, well, fine, it's entertaining. If you make a little bit more money than $20, great, but then you start losing, then stop, rather than try and win your money back, because they got you hooked. So, who teaches money health? So sometimes schools, sometimes banks when you're in trouble, sometimes the government, sometimes credit card companies and finance companies and business, but usually to their profit. So money addictions, gambling. So the meme for that is saving or investing the amount that you gamble instead of gambling. So chasing the next big deal, internet day trading. Also, you find this within the underground economy. Overspending, retail therapy. You want to feel powerful, so you buy stuff beyond your budget or put it on a credit card. So some people think a credit limit is like a goal. How fast can you get there? So consumption, more retail therapy, because more is better, right? Situation of chronic debt, where you're living paycheck to paycheck without being able to save. Getting into a situation where you use payday loans. Another form of credit crack. What I call self-induced poverty. It is basically living large with no skills in terms of learning to use money in a particular way. This used to be called keeping up with the Joneses. Whoever the Joneses are. There is structurally induced poverty, commonly known as welfare, AFD's Aid for Families with Dependent Children, temporary assistance to needy families, food stamp program, etc. And the original idea with these things when they started around World War II or just before World War II is during the Depression, where women weren't considered necessarily part of the workforce, and you had a male breadwinner. If the male breadwinner died, then this temporary aid for families with dependent children and TAMP basically to take the place of the breadwinner until the family got back on its feet, if ever. So induced poverty, sometimes this has always been a pet peeve of mine, particularly with the institution of higher one and all those kind of things. Why? Oftentimes our students, the first time that they've had a big loan is with financial aid. And we haven't been teaching them, you, how to use that and how not to get trapped. Sore subject, but just trying to be real. He's keeping it real. There's a way out. So, for example, then, if you need a thrill, spend the money you have to throw away out of a specific budget for that purpose, so it doesn't damage the rest of your life. This is another specific in terms of setting limits. Chasing the next big deal. Wait a minute, where did that come from? Again, setting limits and setting goals with a certain degree of safety. As a drug counselor, I would counsel people to avoid the underground economy altogether because it's risky. But this class isn't designed to teach you how to successfully negotiate it. So when we look at the concept of what wealth is, and in America that's usually talking about money. So wealth is defined by the dictionary as a great quantity of money or valuable possessions, riches, the conditions of being rich, affluence, a profusion or abundance, all goods and resources having economic value. Wealth from a more cross-cultural view includes family, spiritual status, spiritual wisdom or knowledge, social influence, privilege, information access, cultural information access. There's a difference between being rich and being wealthy. And usually it's a power equation. So I used to say a decade ago, Jay-Z might be rich, but he's not wealthy. Because Bill Gates is wealthy, and he has the ear of the president, plus he owns a company whose software 90% of the computers on the planet are running. That's a certain power or influence. Now, Jay-Z might have some more influence with Obama than with Bush, and he may be considered wealthy. But wealth is about power and influence, not just simply money. Being rich is just about having money. So in another context, a true Apache, the true Apache sees wealth as your family. That's wealth, your loved ones that are still alive. Not what you have, but who you have. That's what's wealth. We don't look for material things. I mean, I'm glad to have the clothes I have, the jewelry I have, but I'd be happy as long as my family, my relatives are still living. Okay, so wealth in a cross-cultural context. Health could be considered wealth, too. So, poverty is an absence of wealth accompanied by lack of power, often reinforced by a sense of learned helplessness. Now, from the literature, they talked about welfare inducing a state of learned helplessness. So individuals who are made to feel inadequate and unable to master certain tasks become actually unable to perform those tasks that are objectively within their grasp. So, for example, one of the reasons that we looked at inventing the whole crash construct was basically trying to move one of the more intractable welfare populations, which was women of color who were addicted. There's a certain structure of learned helplessness where on welfare, you're not even allowed to have a savings account. So how is it that you develop skills with money if you can't even do one of the basic skills of dealing with money, saving? How do you do that? I mean, if you're not getting it from school. Okay? So poverty then is also not only an absence of wealth, lack of power, often reinforced by a sense of learned helplessness. So reinforced when people don't access the information to prevent or get them out of the problem, and then the problem becomes more expensive to fix over time. Now, I'm a big fan, as you know, of seeking real solutions that work in people's lives, and not depending on the system at all. If you, okay, you can depend on the system to keep the Russians from bombing us. How about that? But as far as teaching you how to deal with money, not so much. So there's a story. Have I told you about Mondragon? Thank you. The construct is called Mississippi, Mississippi, Mondragon. So in order to tell you about Mississippi Mondragon in 5 minutes, I have to tell you what Mondragon is. Mondragon is a Basque corporation, still in operation today. It's a cooperative business, cooperative corporation. It's made up of 289 interlocking cooperatives. So in other words, the people that are working in it, so there's like 80,000 people working in it, they're owners as well as being workers. And it started out post-World War II making paraffins, basically kitchen appliances. So in order to manufacture kitchen appliances, one of the first things they had to do was create a bank from scratch. How many of you can create a bank? Oh, did you know you could create a bank from scratch? It's been done here in this community. So they created a bank with their owners and bankers, and then the bank then loans money to start the manufacturing process. Then we also need a school to teach people not only how to manufacture the stoves, but how to work in a cooperative, because most people are used to being employees. So there's a special skill set when you're an owner and an employee and a cooperative. So we need to teach you how to do that. Then people get hurt on the job. We need a hospital. So the doctors, the nurses, and the patients are all owners of the hospital. We need an insurance company to pay for the doctor. Boom. Well, we just created a bank. Boom, 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 boom. 289 interlocking cooperatives along the lines of finance, distribution, and information and knowledge production. Now, that's Mondragon. Mississippi Mondragon goes like this. Take 10 folks on welfare in Mississippi. $300 a month. Welfare check. Okay, so this is illegal. And I'm going to show you what the illegal part is. Okay, on welfare you can't even have a savings account. So 10 folks, $10 each, or actually 10%, $30 each, that means a kitty of $300 going to one person to start a business. That's the illegal part. Can't use the money to start a business. In a year, they were all off welfare and their businesses were self-sustaining. So remember, this is illegal. Now, how come welfare reform isn't about teaching people to have money skills or start your own business? You think the Republicans would be all over that? That's basic capitalism. 60 Minutes reported it as a case of welfare fraud. Okay, which it is, straight up. Because you can't use your welfare check to start a business. But they didn't like being dependent on welfare. And remember, it's Mississippi. So it doesn't even matter what the businesses are, you know? So what, food, cleaning, I mean, what kind of business can you start with $300? All right? So part of the piece that I have in introducing this concept is, what if we did that here? And taught people to be smarter with money instead of, cooperative education, not placing you in an employer, creating a co-op in which you are the business owner. Paying off your student loans the way some employers do. That would be like dangerous. So we'll continue this on Thursday.
Lane Online. Learn, unlearn, relearn.